Hello and welcome to MotorInc First. This is time for the blockbuster. I think we've waited long enough for this.
This is going to be a really long episode. I have a strong feeling about it. So motoring videos generally always have chapters. In this particular case, you're going to need the chapters to navigate forward and backward to figure out which sections you'd like to watch now and which you'd like to save for later, etc. It's just a long story. Not my fault. Nothing we can do.
So, straight in. KTM 390 Adventure, Shumi's ridden it.
This, I think, is the longest we've covered on a machine before we did a motoring first, if you think about it.
Achha.
So we've done 1,200 kilometers on a motorcycle before we doing motoring first.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it happened like that because he was out for a family thing and I was free during those days because the studio was busy, so I had time to ride. So it turns out I rode the bike about, I'm going to say 70, 80, 90 kilometers in Goa during the media preview.
Mm-hmm.
And then the KTM guys very kindly said, since you're the last batch and this bike is eventually going to go back to Pune, you can just ride it back. A number of us did that. So instead of going off-roading there, I took the bike back home. And then I've been riding it since. So 1,200 kilometers. Therefore, we have some amount of city experience, a lot of highway experience, a lot of bad road experience.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm suggesting is we have 4 primary things to talk about for the Adventure family as a whole. One is the model that we're discussing today, which is KTM 390 Adventure. On their website, you will see this listed as the 390 Adventure S in a few places.
Okay.
S and without the suffix means exactly the same thing, the bike we are going to discuss today. We'll discuss the 390X in a separate episode because why the 390X arrived for the last generation is a very different set of logic.
Okay.
Then there is the KTM bankruptcy thing that we have to discuss. And somewhere in the middle is the discussion of this 390 family suddenly becoming a really large family, which I think will be part of this episode. But we'll work through this.
The current top.
Current top.
Because there's more to come.
There's a lot more to come. We'll come back to this in detail, but if you think about it, you currently have the 390 Duke, which debuted this engine platform and this chassis platform. From this, an RC390 will come at some point, is what I'm being told. Maybe end of this year, maybe next year, I don't know. In the middle now, they're filling out a range of motorcycles from road all the way till hardcore off-road. So you've got the 390 Adventure X, which is meant to be a road bike in terms of it's a touring motorcycle, but with suspension travel and everything. Then there is the travel bike with some off-road ability, which is what we're discussing today, the 390 Adventure. Then there is the travel bike with a lot of off-road ability to the point where it might even compromise its travel ability. I don't know. That's the Adventure R. Then there is the off-road bike that doesn't care about travel, which is the Enduro R.
Okay.
And since they built the Enduro R, they basically changed that bike's wheels to the 17-inch wheels from the Duke, and you get the super motard, which is the SMC R. And I understand none of these bikes have been decided as not coming to India.
Okay.
If you go to KTM's website today, I think if you go to the dual sports section, you will find the Enduro R there with a pre-booking button for $19.99, I believe. You can pre-book the Enduro R in India.
Since you've already come here, any timelines on those?
No, but I don't believe it will be very long.
Okay.
The KTM's money issues, they need to sell product. These are an exciting line of products in one of those markets where the 390 is really popular. So why would KTM delay these products? I believe it would be mostly paperwork. So if, let's say the Adventure R is ready, but I don't know, homologation paperwork has not come, that might be the reason why it's not here yet. Or it will be a logistics thing where they say, look, we're already launching the X and this model. Okay, let's wait 3 months and then bring the R.
And there's a 250 as well, right?
There's a 250 ADV also. That is the weakest model in this whole lineup because I think it will go to Southeast Asia where taxation laws allow 250s, like our sub 4 meter rule, allows them to have tax breaks. But in India, between the 390X and the 390 Adventure X and the 250 Adventure, the price difference is only about 40,000 rupees or something.
Okay. So
260 and 295, 35,000 rupees. I don't know that you'd want to buy a 250 Adventure at that price.
Okay.
We'll talk about all of this in detail. Where would you like to start?
I think we'll go with the price. Given that this is all new and presumably properly done, how much more expensive is it than before?
$6,000.
Really?
I told you the previous one was one of the worst KTMs I have ever tested. And everything that I will tell you today, and if you're an owner, please don't take this the wrong way. I'm an evaluator. I'm happy that you're enjoying your bike. It doesn't make the bike better or worse. I still have to do my job. So I've told you before, And you brought these ideas to me before also. You helped me crystallize the thought that the previous Adventure was one of the worst things KTM's ever made. This bike confirms that end over end, that is exactly how it was, because it fixes all of those issues and at what? 6,000 rupees more.
KTM press note. And the first line of that press note, but it says, a true orange adventure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you know what that means about the previous one, right?
Yeah. So let me quickly run through the platform so you understand what's happened. And I'm going to completely disregard the previous Adventure because I need to give you just 3 lines of context so you understand what has happened. The previous Adventure wasn't supposed to exist. This is evidenced by the fact that there were spy shots of an off-roader based on the first Duke platform. Prototypes were spotted and then silence. They were tested, and obviously somebody reached a conclusion saying the Adventure that will come out of this frame is just not going to work. But for some reason, a very small iteration of this frame, which had the bolt-on subframe, was used to create the Adventure that you recognize as the previous generation 390 Adventure. When they did the new Duke, the third generation Duke, the engine was reformatted a little bit, the crank moved up, it became a little bit more compact, the frame was redesigned, and the primary reason is something that Karthik pointed out to me when we did the first time the 390 Adventure video together, where he pointed out that since the engine is tall and the frame is tall, KTM has a choice. They can either give you ground clearance or they can give you a reasonable seat height, but not both. And when you try to compromise and say what's the best setting possible, you'd have to give stiff suspension because the bike was simply too tall at that point to have pliant suspension. This is what they've fixed with this new platform.
Can we just do the numbers, please? I'm dying to hear them out. How much is the ground clearance?
So this motorcycle has an advantage of almost 60 millimeters in total. Seat height and ground clearance included, the advantage is 60 milliliters.
What does that mean? Sorry?
So your ground clearance is now 237 millimeters.
Which is, earlier it was
200-ish. Right? So you've gained that. And the seat height falls from 855 to 830 on the top model, 825 on the X.
Dude, I'm getting goosebumps, man.
Right? And as soon as you have the waist of the motorcycle, as it were, vertically, not horizontally, as soon as you have the waist compressed and you can basically position this mass higher or lower depending on the format, you can have suspension that works.
I'm sorry, but small rant. This is why we've always said, ride and decide, because no matter what somebody is trying to tell you or sell you, more often than not, it's not going to be exactly what they're saying. And in this case, just look at the numbers that Shumi is talking about. This sounds like a proper adventure bike, accessible with the additional travel, which you would have wanted and expected, especially for a company that, I mean, has painted Dakar stages orange for decades.
Yeah, I'm bringing out my iPad because I want, since we're here, we'll quickly take a detour into how much this narrow waist of the platform changes things for you, okay? So we know already that the Duke 390 has a ground clearance of 183 millimeters, okay? Which makes it 17 millimeters less than the old Adventure, which is not a joke, right? This on the X model is 232. On the model we're discussing today, the Adventure, it is 227. On the R model, it will jump to 272 millimeters, which is the highest in this family of motorcycles.
So I'm guessing when you go to 272 mm, that's when the seat height goes to 8.
Correct. Now the seat height range, there are effectively 3 or 4 seat heights in play. The lowest is obviously the Duke at 820. In India, we get the lower version of that seat, which is 800, right? Now the X model seat height is 825. Which is also the low seat height for the Himalayan on the adjustable seat. The high Himalayan is 845, low Himalayan 825. There's a lot of 825 mm bikes. Remember, this is a particularly narrow motorcycle by design. We'll talk about it, which also means it'll actually feel lower than 825 also. He's 5'6". I'm willing to bet when he sits down on the motorcycle, he will have both his feet down more or less flat. Then at 830 mm is the model we're discussing today, which is the Adventure. The R model rises to 870. 870, which is still just 15 millimeters more than the old Adventure, mind you.
Wow.
But ground clearance is now 272. So 15 millimeter increment in seat height gives you 72 millimeters of increase in ground clearance. That's how small this motorcycle's middle is, right? The tallest motorcycle in this group, no surprises, is the Enduro R, 890 millimeters. Now you're approaching what the X-Pulse with the rally kit would feel like, right? And when you take this Enduro R and put the 17-inch wheels from the Duke, the seat height falls down to 860 millimeters.
Sorry, what was the last one? When you
So
take
when you take the Enduro R, the 890 saddle, and you switch out the 21, 17, 21, 18, whatever the combination is, and go back down to 17-inch wheels, the Duke alloys, as it were, you get a seat height of 860.
and that's the
That's the SMCR, the supermotor.
the supermotor. Okay.
That's the spread.
Wow. That's
Okay.
quite a family now.
Yes. And in here are basically three kinds of suspension. Again, whole family we are covering. There's the Duke suspension, which is, I'm going to call it mildly adjustable because the adjustability spread has changed. Mildly adjustable in the sense you have compression and rebound in the front. You've got rebound and preload at the back, but they both have about 150 millimeters of travel. When you jump to the Adventures, you get to 200 millimeters of travel. When you get to the Adventure R, that jumps to 230 millimeters of travel. And at 230R, you're getting higher specification shocks also. They're more sophisticated units. Then you get 230s in all of the off-roaders. So the Adventure R, the Enduro R and the SMCR all have these 230 shocks in them. When the prices come for these models for India, the big expense that you'll pay for is the upgrade in the suspension.
I'm not asking you too many questions about those. I mean,
No, I'm just giving you a spread now.
because I'm guessing you've not even seen it in the flesh.
No. I've just gone to the website, looked at the numbers together.
But
so you understand
at this event, you only had the S or the standard.
Only the standard.
You didn't have anything else to even look at.
No. And just so you know, fuel tanks also, there are 3 fuel tanks in play, and we will come back to this also. I'm just giving you the spread. The largest fuel tank in this group is in the Duke. Roughly the same size, but slightly smaller is on the Adventures. It's not a problem. I'll come back to this. It's not a problem. But the serious off-roader and the SMCR, which have same bodywork, they have just a 9-liter tank.
Wow.
Why? Because they are genuinely recreational off-roaders. And this is the first point I can't stress enough. If you are a recreational off-roader and you've been desperately waiting for something to play with off-road, it has no other job but to give you pleasure off-road, don't jump yet. Please wait for the Adventure R and the Enduro R to show up. They are more serious dirt bikes than this bike is, which is not to say this bike is incapable.
I was just going to say,
Which is not to say this bike is incapable, but this is still a travel motorcycle. The biggest clue you can get is when you go to KTM's website, India website, and you look at the segments of motorcycles, you'll find these Adventures under the travel section. You'll find the Enduro under the dual sport. Okay, so it's a big family of 390s. I believe they're all coming to India is what I understand of it is going to happen. If you are a recreational off-roader, do not get tempted by this motorcycle, which again, I'm not saying it's incapable. I'm just saying the right product for you having fun off-road for its own sake, that bike is still to make an appearance.
Okay.
So if you think about, you split the world into 2 parts. I saw this yesterday on a YouTube channel, which is called, I'll put a credit to Ian, and Ian said, there are dirt bikes that you use to explore, and there are dirt bikes that you use to play. The play dirt bikes are in the future. The explore dirt bike has arrived.
Okay.
So we've talked about the engine platform. Is this the Duke engine? Absolutely it is. 0 changes made to this engine.
0 changes?
0 changes. So the hardware is all exactly the same. They've only added 3 teeth to the rear sprocket.
Oh, really?
It used to be 1443.
Oh, good.
Now it is a 1446. I am not even going to bother telling you the difference in gearing from the old Adventure to this, because honestly that bike is just now, it's completely irrelevant now. There's no crossover point at all. And again, I'm not demeaning the bike anymore. I'm done with that. I'm just saying there's no crossover point. Okay. But there are fresh ignition maps. And these maps are designed to help you travel and explore off-road. These are not frantic, exciting maps.
Before you go any further, I'm gonna list out all my pain points of the previous bike, which I remember clearly. It's been ages since I rode it, but I remember the first ride very, very clearly. And I'd like to know if those are fixed whenever as you tackle them. Since you started with the ignition maps, that bike had an issue of poor grunt at low revs. So typically when you were off-road, when you wanted to climb, when you were on bad surfaces, you would not have enough grunt and the engine would cut out on you. The other thing was every time you switched off the engine, it would switch traction control.
Solved.
Okay, traction control.
Solved.
Okay, that's done. The suspension was hard
Solved.
and it would. Okay, and on the travel front, that suspension would never give you that sense of plushness.
Solved.
Okay. And yeah, that I didn't really enjoy off-road all that much. It was
Solved.
okay then.
Yeah, I'm really happy to have ridden this bike. It is really, really a good bike. So I wrote a caption on MotorInc Circles when I was telling people that I rode the bike, and this is my first 3 things that occurred to me type of thing. And I said my first reaction was, what have they done? Because it was non-KTM-y in some ways, right?
It's
And
not
then, and then 400 kilometers later, oh, that's what they've done. And it makes sense. So the first thing you have to understand is, actually, I'm going to do more context setting. I'm sorry to string this out, but these are important ideas, okay? Did you know KTM has a scale of off-roaders? And as soon as I tell you the scale, you will say, that makes sense.
No, tell me.
Okay? The first thing that they told us is this is a level 3 off-roader. This bike, the KTM 390 Adventure, is a level 3 off-roader. Okay, so how many levels are there? Like 3700, 125, 2, right? So they explained a level 1 off-roader is a motorcycle that has the same ability as any street bike might. So in theory, KTM would classify the Honda Activa 6G as a level 1 off-roader. Whatever capability set that is, and however admirable or non you think it is, that's what it is. So a Duke 125, a Duke 390 are all level 1 off-roaders on this scale.
Okay.
Not that KTM thinks it's an off-road, I'm just saying scale. Level 2, you're going off-road, you're on looser surfaces, but your wheels remain in contact with the ground. What that implies is your ground clearance requirement isn't substantial. Your suspension travel requirement is also not substantial. And in that sense, the previous 390 Adventure may have been a low 2, maybe a mid 2 on this scale. They classify the current Adventure as a level 3 off-roader. You're on loose surfaces, your wheels are mostly on the ground, you do get some amount of airtime, you might have to land a jump or 2. It's not a constant jumping, but it is there. And this Adventure that we're discussing today, not the X, this is a mid 3.
Got it.
I haven't been able to peg the X yet because I haven't ridden it yet. We will see. But the alloy wheels on that bike, 1917 setup, that tells me that bike is going to end up at a high 2, maybe low 3 at best. This bike that we're testing today, and this is an India-specific model, I'll come back to that also, is a mid 3.
Oh, this is an India-specific model.
It goes to Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and India. We'll discuss it. We'll discuss it. And above this, level 4 is more serious technical off-roading where you might have boulders to negotiate, etc., etc. So you need even more ground clearance, you need even more suspension travel, which might push the seat height to unreasonably high levels by our standards, and that's okay. That's part of the purpose of that motorcycle. Level 5 is anything more serious than that, usually competition grade.
Okay. So Enduro R would be a 4.
Enduro R should be a low 4.
Okay.
But the interesting thing KTM said is, this frame is designed to be a level 4 frame. So if you were to take this motorcycle and spend a considerable amount of money on suspension and tuning, you could turn this level 3.5 motorcycle into a 4 with not a lot of work. A lot of money, but not a lot of work.
So good bones, basically.
Good bones designed to do hardcore off-road, but remember, they are still classifying these as travel motorcycles and not off-road motorcycles, and to me they are making a very intelligent and critical distinction.
Right.
The Adventure R will be more serious off-road, the Enduro R is the serious off-roader. Above that are the really serious off-roaders, which is your SXFs and SXCs and all of those motorcycles. And I'd want to explain the India part as well. If the Adventure R were to come here with its 270 mm saddle height and the 230 mm of suspension travel, many of us would think that bike is just too much for us in terms of height. Therefore, KTM's taken the very, very interesting approach of saying, can we have a middle order motorcycle? So the X has similar suspension travel, not all the electronics and not such sophisticated suspension at a great price point. And the model we're discussing today has all the IMU equipped electronics. So you've got traction control, you've got ABS that you can switch off, you've got 3 riding modes, you've got cruise control as standard, etc. and it's got adjustable suspension, and it's got tubeless tires, and it's got the 21/17 setup, whereas the Adventure R has a 18-inch rear wheel, so it's a more serious off-roader that way too.
One sec. And all this for $6,000 more?
From the previous one, yes, but now for the moment it is the most expensive KTM in the country today at 361 ex showroom.
But that's a lot more bike than before. I mean, if you just
It's a massively good deal.
Wow. Because the old one was also 1917, right? That wasn't even a 21.
No.
It was a 1917 and it
Yep.
didn't have any of this.
No.
Wow. Okay.
And they've pulled out a lot of the stops. So the tubeless tires,
Yeah.
it's a very simple construction in the sense it's a regular spoke rim, as it were. Slightly different mechanical construction inside, but more or less the same thing. There's a piece of tape that covers the spoke nipples, and there's a rubber thing that clips into place, which is what the hardware difference is. And once it clips into place, it becomes a tubeless rim. It's a KTM patent, which means there is no restriction on how many of these they can import and sell in the domestic market.
So are they making this here in India or are they importing?
Whether they're importing those two rubber pieces or they're making them here, I'm not sure.
Oh, so it's a regular rim?
But it's just a regular rim, yeah.
Oh.
It's just a regular rim. And they use this solution on their bigger machines already. And therefore, if this solution causes any long-term issues, you should be able to go to KTM forums globally and look up what the issues with these tubeless wheels are. But in theory, the spoke, the two pieces of rubber are 3 units, and whatever breaks, you can replace one of them, and in theory, and you can continue to have tubeless rims.
Nice.
And unlike the Himalayan, which has odd tire sizes, so sometimes finding upgrade tires and replacement tires can be challenging. These are KTM's international tire sizes. It's a 1990 front and a 130 something rear. There's tons of tires in these sizes in India and outside. In India, you do get touring oriented road tires for this bike. In these sizes, you also get knobbies, which are marked as not for road use, also in India already. Timson has some, etc., etc. But the tires it comes with, which is the Trampler from Apollo, brilliant tire. It works really well on this bike. The Seat on the Himalayan 450, also excellent tire. The Trampler is at least as good, if not 10-15% better in almost all situations.
You didn't... Okay, anyways, that we'll get to later. Because there was that wet roads thingy about the performance.
Yes, but on the Himalayan, that's a bigger issue because there are no electronics to back you up. It's got electronics, so it's not a problem.
Okay, fine. Now, curiosity is on full power. Let's talk from the saddle. What is it like first time you got on the bike?
So the first time I saw this bike, it was in a parking lot with like a series of these bikes parked, and they look big, right? Because I mean, it's like the Dakar look, as they call it. I'm not entirely convinced that it looks all the way like the Dakar motorcycle, but okay, whatever, inspired by. So you've got this tall fairing and all of this kind of thing, right? So the first, you're like, that looks kind of big. Not Himalayan big though. Modern big.
Himalayan is long.
Yeah,
I think more
the Himalayan has a different kind of bigness to it, and this KTM looks modern big. Modern big is not always heavy big. It is just physically large. Then when you get on the seat, you're like, oh hey, this is not tall. Because the 825 is not clicked into your head, right? It's not tall. My feet are down like naturally. You're not like doing 1 foot to 1 foot to 1 foot as you would, for example, on an X-Pulse Rally kit, right? Or a Rally Pro or whatever they call it now. You're not doing that dance. You're sitting like, hey, this is just a street bike. Then you realize it's a really narrow motorcycle.
I'm sorry, because you brought it up, now that question's come up. The Rally, whatever, do you have any numbers on that? I mean, what's the seat height like on that?
If I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, please, it was 905 mm on the X-Pulse Rally kit.
Okay, but it's super slim, okay. And the ground clearance, do you remember? 220 or something like
that? On the X-Pulse? 270, 250, some big number like that.
Oh,
massive number.
And this is 247, you said?
This is
37.
Right? So you have 230 mm of ground clearance, you have an 825 mm seat, and you sit down and your feet just, I'm 6 foot tall for reference. My feet are flat on the ground and my knees are slightly bent.
Wow.
Stock preload, which is 2 from soft.
Okay, fine. So it feels low enough.
And then it feels super narrow because it's narrow. And then you realize it's a dirt bike. I mean, they're supposed to be narrow. I mean, when I rode the Africa Twin for the first time, which is not a super narrow motorcycle, but as you ride it, the feeling of the Africa Twin is this is a narrow motorcycle, whereas a lot of the other ADVs feel like a broad motorcycle. All the dirt bikes I've ever had a privilege of riding, various people's personal motorcycles, they've always felt super skinny and narrow. The KTM 390 Adventure is super skinny and narrow.
So I've
And then on the Himalayan, your legs spread out a little bit wider. On the
Because it's
KTM, they do
tank,
not.
yeah.
They do not. And then on the Himalayan, again, just for reference, you have this handlebar that sort of opens your chest out. No, it's a normal narrow-ish handlebar. Not super narrow, but narrow. At this point, you'll also notice that this KTM Adventure has bar end vibration dampers. Now, I want you to open any KTM global website and look at the same motorcycle. You discover they do not have the vibration dampers. It's an India specific thing because our expectation of vibration is different from theirs.
Correct.
Which means if you were to remove the vibration damper because you accept vibrations as normal for a large cylinder, we'll talk about it in detail, then you will get a little bit of a weight reduction out of that too.
All right.
Right? Then you'll notice these enormously thick rubber inserts on the serrated pegs. These are forged foot pegs. They were forged the last time around also. They still are. That angle thing that became very famous as an issue, fixed. They're horizontal and flat.
Okay.
And they've got a massively thick rubber. And that massively thick rubber is another sign that this bike has some amount of vibration in it. Which again, Austria thinks is just fine. But for India, expectation management needs to be done. And therefore, a lot of work has gone into managing the expectation to the point where your primary experience of vibration on this bike is one, a feeling, and I'll talk about it, and the foot peg.
And does it still have that same kind of tank construction as the previous gen? That roto something plastic tank?
No, metal tank. This generation has metal tanks. The Duke also has a metal tank with a plastic cowling around it. So does this. The plastics are different. You are going to have to reset your expectations about these plastics. These are proper dirt bike plastics, which means they are bendy. They are not super shiny. And they will be very easy to keep on the bike in the sense when you drop it, it will bend rather than break. But these are not going to feel like the harder plastics that you're used to where you put silicone and buff and all that and it glows and gleams. This is not that kind of plastic. This is hard wearing, purposeful plastic. The one thing that KTM has done, which might turn out to be a good thing, is what you think are graphics on the tank is actually pigmented into the plastic itself. So the white parts, stickers or otherwise, are white. So when you scratch them, it's white underneath too. So from a distance, your bike will look scratchless no matter how much you scuff it up. And I'll tell you this, the pants I am using, they do have sections which are slightly abrasive. And in 1200 kilometers, there are scuff marks already on this motorcycle. Not visible, but in these studio lights, when you go looking for them, you can see them. I looked this up on YouTube, and the way to make it shiny again is actually to use rubbing compound and create a new surface, as it were.
Oh, scrub it off.
Right. So if you're not a hardcore off-roader and you would like your bike to remain pristine, figure out where your leg touches the motorcycle the most. You're going to want either grip pads there or a PPF layer there, primarily to protect the plastic. The plastic doesn't need help though.
Yeah.
Dirt bike plastics are just work. KTM plastics are generally quite cheap. So in theory, if you scrape it up badly enough and go and say, okay, just give me a fresh one, it shouldn't be expensive.
Like my impulse, every time I went off-road, I would invariably at some point or the other crash. And the one thing I have not changed on my bike are panels. Like that the only two things that I've interacted with on the 390 Adventure with while it was parked in the office was the view from the rear. And that's interesting because it's such a slim form coming all the way back. And it's so low. Like if you just look at that part of the bike, you don't even think of it as an adventure in the sense that it's so low and flat and clean.
I think when the Adventure R comes, then that sense that you have in your head of a travel-y dirt bike, that will come with that height comes from there. And that gap between the tire and the rear end grows.
And the other thing is that the seat was slim, and which is why you notice that the grab rails are so far out wide. Because I think for a Pillion, there won't be that much space.
Yeah. So let me also, since you brought up the Pillion, let me get this also out of the way. How is a Pillion on this motorcycle? They are reasonably comfortable. The previous 390 Adventure had vastly more spacious Pillion accommodations. So if you're going to take a Pillion and go traveling on this motorcycle, it can be done. It is not going to feel super spacious. The Himalayan's better for that particular job. This bike's job, and I'll give you hardware indication that tell you this bike's job, is you go traveling by yourself, you go traveling with your luggage, the bike will take it. And the biggest way to understand this is the reason why the foot pegs for the Pillion are not mounted to the subframe is so that the subframe loads can be designed accordingly. And right behind your heel are two bolts. You remove those two bolts, the entire subframe containing the Pillion foot peg comes off the motorcycle in one shot.
Out of the way. Awesome. Awesome. I like it. It's
Yeah,
focused.
I like it.
I like it.
I like it.
I mean, if you ask me 390 Adventure at any point, did you think about, hey, I want to take a Pillion on board and go with it? No, that's
No.
that's
And
that's
okay,
not the idea.
let me reverse this argument. If you did want to buy a 390 Adventure and desperately said, no, I do want to travel with a Pillion, I would tell you to go to a seat guy and just alter your seat very slightly. It's not a major mod. There is a dish which becomes flat, so the rider has a bunch of choices about where they want to sit, because when they're riding off-road, you move your weight quite a bit. Where it ends, you move that end forward up the bike a little bit so that your Pillion has a slightly longer pad. It will help.
You think the width is enough?
The width you will get used to. So when I sat on the bike the first time, this is what I was coming to next in terms of the first impression. My sit bones just about reach the edge of the seat. I have very little seat left beyond the beyond my sit bones, and I'm not like a super wide person in the hip. So I did think about that. 400 kilometers later, I did think about that.
But I think the Pillion seat is narrower than your
And the
rider's
Pillion seat is narrower.
Yeah.
So to me, if you intend to take this on with a Pillion, you're going to have to work it out. It's not automatically going to work.
Like the older Adventure, you could just say, okay, yeah, somebody is on the
Yeah, it's
back,
fine.
we can ride.
Yeah.
That's okay.
No.
Like this one would be like, how keen is your Pillion to come along with you, is the thought
Yes.
that came to me.
And I won't going to say the suspension will allow you to solve it. The other accommodations are there. It's the fact that you'll have to figure out what to do with the seat. You'll have to work with a seat guy to say, how do I make it wider? How do I make it a little bit broader and accommodate a Pillion? It can be done, but its primary job is long distance solo touring, which it is really good at.
Awesome. The only other thing I want to talk about is that I love that little detail he was talking about, the plastics. Like this beak is made of that special plastic.
Polypropylene.
And basically I've had it on my Impulse get tucked all the way in, and you just push it out and it just comes out and just goes back into its shape. Nothing happens to it.
Yeah.
So this bike, if you're actually going to use it off-road, have it fall, you will not have to worry about those kind of things.
And the idea is that these plastics are more or less fundamentally shared all the way from the X all the way out till the Enduro R. So they're meant to be dropped, scraped, scratched, have fun with your motorcycle, and it doesn't automatically mean you're replacing plastics constantly because they're cracking and breaking. That's not what's going to happen.
Just quickly before we move on, what is the weight of this bike?
165 dry, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow.
Yeah, it's 180 kilos or something.
Okay, that's pretty solid, man.
Yeah, I'll tell you exactly. It's 181 for the X, 182 for this motorcycle. Just for your reference, the old motorcycle was 177, the spoke wheel version, and the Himalayans 196.
That's pretty good. Yeah. Okay.
And it doesn't feel like that.
Okay, carry on.
So okay. So now we are sitting on the motorcycle. We're realizing the seat feels a little bit. Yeah, the seat feels a little bit narrow, and there's this huge fairing in front of you. And they've built a tower to sort of mimic the Dakar thing. But what it does is they puts the screen up really high and they tilt the screen back. And the idea being, you stand up, you sit down, the view is pretty clear.
As in you can change the angle?
No, it's just tilted up like this, just enough. But this is a bonded LCD screen, which means there is no air gap between the screen itself and the glass layer. So therefore, it will not have condensation issues, glare is minimized, etc. KTM's international website refers to a polarizing coating that also cuts glare. The India documentation doesn't have it. But since they make one motorcycle for the world, I'm assuming we also get that coating for what it's worth. The GPS mount used to be very useful on the old model. On this one, it is not obvious, but there is a clip-on plate behind the screen which you can remove, and you'll find 2 threaded screws there. And I think that's your option for mounting a GPS or a navigation device or whatever, which will now appear above the screen. And the screen is so tall that the cutout in the screen is just above this. It's a really tall screen. It's a really good screen, but it's a really tall screen, right? So, narrow motorcycle, not a tall motorcycle, reasonably wide handlebars, not stupidly wide or dirt bike wide. This view. And then you go this, hey, where's the weight?
All right.
It doesn't have a sense of weight.
Nice.
Not at standstill, not on the move does it have a sense of weight.
Awesome.
And I know this is not going to sound complimentary, but this is what it felt like, so I'm going to say it again. If you're on MotorInc Circles, you know I've already said this. After a while, I started thinking, this feels like a tall Duke. And the tall Duke was a derogatory reference to the previous Adventure. I'm just referring to how the motorcycle feels in terms of weight. It feels like a tall Duke. It has no more complication than that to ride. It feels weightless. It's easy to pilot. No issues at all.
Okay. You said the screen is tall and you are tall, so it didn't get. I'm guessing it didn't get into your field of view.
It didn't get my
But
field.
for somebody like me, would
It didn't get in the field of view. It didn't do any buffeting. I am going to assume that most of us will be okay.
Okay.
For some of us, the screen, especially I think if you're 5'4", the screen might actually be right in front of your eyes.
Okay.
And for those specific heights, they will have to work out a alternative, because as of today, there is no alternative to this screen. KTM doesn't make a higher or taller or lower version of this. This is what it is. I'm sure aftermarket will come with other versions of this.
Yeah.
So this screen, it works. So out on the highway, I didn't have any basic issues from the screen at all.
Okay.
Is your ventilation cut off by the fact that this is a massive screen? It reduces your ventilation for sure. Does it reduce it to the point where I thought, oh my God, this is just horrible?
You're getting stuffy.
No. The highest temperature I saw on this ride was 36 degrees plus. I didn't have a feeling that it was the ventilation that was causing me to be uncomfortable. We are okay.
And buffeting?
Zero.
Nothing. Awesome.
Zero. There's a massive cutout in it. It solves. And I tested this motorcycle with a regular full face helmet, the orange one, and my peaked helmet, which is an ADV helmet, not a motocross helmet. No buffeting on either, both on highways, both in crosswinds, no stress.
Okay.
So no issues are coming from these things.
Okay. Now rewind. Pick the bike up.
It's not going to sound awesome,
Okay.
and it's not going to feel smooth.
So none of the Dukes have ever sounded good, but is it
This
worse?
engine sounds a little bit more metallic than even that.
Oh.
So I'm going to clearly tell you, there are moments and revs at which this bike can feel nice in your ear. When you approach the red line, does it have that weird KTM-y note that makes you feel like, oh, we're doing so much? Yes, it does. But will you fundamentally think that, wow, this is a nice sounding bike? No, I don't think you are.
Okay.
And I don't think that's an automatic issue, but I'm just setting your expectation. It's not.
But the smoothness angle?
It's smooth in the right places at the right speeds, but it is not what I can call a smooth engine.
This is like the ulta of the
Yeah, no, it is the
Himalayan.
ulta of the Himalayan in some way. It is. You're absolutely right. Okay, see, here's what happens on the Himalayan. The Himalayan starts off smooth with a lot of torque. And then as you hit the highway pace, the vibration starts to build up. And if you want to push harder than that, you can. The engine is actually quite happy to do it, but you have to deal with vibration in the process. Correct? This bike is almost exactly the opposite of this. This is a very tractable engine, but this is not an engine where you say, my God, so much torque off the bottom. No, it will never die. You'll get down to 30 kmph in third and fourth and make the connection saying, hey, it's actually pretty tractable. It's not a bad thing.
Okay.
But will you think of this as, wow, so torquey, I can sit at 2000 RPM all day? No, you're not going to think that. It really wakes up at 5500 RPM. And from about 55 to about 6.5, 7, it stays smooth enough. So highway speeds, 80 to 120, settle down, everything is in its place, smooth.
Awesome.
Above that, that urgency, that little bit of vibration and all of that appears. Somehow KTM pulls this off where all of this totals up to something other than strain, whereas when Triumph does this, it feels like strain. So it doesn't feel strained above this, it feels like, yes, now, let's go. And it has that urgency, but it is still controlled, not like the Duke at all. So again, I know that this sounds confusing. It will never feel like a smooth engine. And the primary reason is there's a feeling inside that it's just not feeling clean. You can't really put your finger on it. The biggest thing that vibrates is your foot peg. It's not the tank, it's not the seat, it's not the handlebar.
So the way you're describing it is that now you can sit and travel with it at highway speeds, but it's still not zen-like at that.
Between 80 to 120, it is very much in the zone.
Okay.
Close enough to zen.
Okay.
Like, I didn't think about what speed I was doing as long as I was between these speeds on the highway, and I'm talking about ghat sections going up, down. As long as I stayed between 5 and everything was okay. When I'm overtaking something and you go from 7 to 9000 RPM or whatever, then you're like, oh wow, it's fast. But in that speed zone, it doesn't tell you it is fast. It is just very calm and very purposeful about it, saying, okay, we will go quick.
Since this is the bike to travel in, and one of the reasons why, I mean, as much as he loves the Multistrada, until the V4, the Multistrada was not a bike for me, was because it was a one-mood bike. Like it wanted to travel, but it wanted to travel quickly. Whereas what I want when I'm traveling is that the bike does its thing, lets me do my thing, which is take in the scenery.
Yes. So I'll give you this as context. everybody who rode the Himalayan and the 390 Adventure back to back in the office thought that the 390 was smoother overall.
Okay.
Overall.
Okay.
But when I put 300 kilometers on the motorcycles back to back, the Himalayan smooth up to a point and then the story goes sideways.
He's got too much context.
The KTM starts out with some amount of vibration constantly, and suddenly you discover that at the highway there is no vibration to deal with.
Okay.
At highway speeds. Above that there is a sense of urgency to it, not strain. Below that there's a sense of, I just wish it was a little cleaner.
Okay.
But there's no fundamental issue.
So you can chill out on it.
So in hindsight, okay, I'm saying hindsight because I've got 1200 kilometers on this bike and I've got 8000 kilometers on 4 Himalayans so far. In both these cases, I don't think of vibration as my primary issue at all.
No, this is nothing to do with vibration. It's to do with the amalgamation of all the factors, like whether...
I would love to have this bike on a highway.
Okay. Okay.
I would love to do it. And to me, if they could have refined this engine further, they would have gotten another step out of it. I don't think they can anymore. Remind me, we'll come back to the idea of these are the largest singles we'll ever experience because I think the next step is a twin and we have to discuss it.
Okay.
Okay, so engine, great on the highway. Great. What do you think is the highest economy I got? I'll tell you the area economy claim is 26.
Yeah. What is the highest you got? 19, 18.
31.
What?
There was a 245 kilometer stretch, which is on this side of Anuskura Ghat. Just starting the Anuskura Ghat, there is a petrol pump I'm forgetting the name of the place, but it's right in the beginning. Then you go through the bad road section and the broken road or whatever, climb the ghat, come the other side.
And
then there are two more.
Until...
There are two more ridges. Do that, then come out on the highway at Karad. I stopped at the Shell station before Pune. Remember the one before the toll booth?
Yeah.
245 kilometers later. 31. The only thing I will tell you is I was not pushing. I was going reasonably quickly, but I wasn't pushing, which means I'm not full throttle acceleration everywhere. I was just saying, if I were to be doing this on, let's say, a 12-day tour, then you can't afford to ride like that. It consumes too much energy. So what if I was in a good pace and holding a good pace? So am I going slowly? No. But am I trying to go down 3 gear changes and overtake everything as fast as I can? Also no. When I did that, it fell to 20.
Okay.
Now, which is why this 14-liter tank doesn't bother me anymore.
Yeah, 40 felt ridiculous.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me anymore because I can genuinely see that if you ride this bike well, a genuine real-world 360 kilometer range is easily possible. Now, we rode the Himalayan and this bike.
And you had luggage on...
I had luggage on the bike. So I rode this bike and the Himalayan back-to-back, 300 kilometers, highway only, more or less. And by highway, I mean 4-lane highway, 6-lane highway, lot of 2-lane highway, and a lot of back roads as a combination. On that 300 kilometer loop, the KTM constantly showed 25 kilometers per liter. The Himalayan showed 28.5 kilometers per liter. But when we filled gas, 1 liter difference.
Okay.
So as far as I'm concerned, if you're deciding between the Himalayan and the Adventure, the economy is not going to make a dent. Whether you need a 17-liter tank or will you manage with a 14-liter tank is the decision you have to make.
I would have liked maybe 16, 17.
I think just to make the point that the Duke is not a tourer, this bike is the tourer. Yeah. If it had 1.5 liters more than the Duke, I think it logically would have made sense. Would they be able to make this bike as narrow as it is with that? I'm not sure.
Yeah, because given that the separation between the models as ideas itself is very nicely fleshed out for people who are looking to travel, right? That way would have...
Yeah, so I agree. Functionally, is there a problem? I don't think so. But could they have done this better by adding a little bit of range and capacity to this and just fleshing the idea of a travel bike out further? Yes, I think the opportunity was
Ladakh ready.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Since we are talking about the engine still, this is a ADV / off-road bike where the exhaust is under the engine. Pro, they save 2 kilos by not having an end can. Pro, they have mass centralization happening because of it, which is one of the reasons why the bike feels so weightless, because all the catcoil and all the heavy bits are tucked right up under the engine. But in the same breath, what happens when you have a water crossing? So this is the official line from KTM, and there was a video to show this happening. They said the system is designed to have baffles that prevent water from being sucked into the engine. Typical motorcycle wading tests are done at 300 mm. That bike passes a 400 mm wading test, which means up to the top of the crash bar roughly, if there is water, this bike will not die.
That's okay in the sense that for me as a system standpoint, that's okay because as long as the engine is on, you don't have a problem.
So the video has somebody switch off the engine,
Oh, they do switch it off.
then they switch it back on and ride out of the water.
Oh, okay, then cool.
Also, the journalists had a water crossing and they basically took I'm going to say 15, 16 of these bikes and they spent most of the rest of the day going through the water and splashing each other. None of their bikes, as far as I can tell, died out of this.
Okay, cool.
There was some side discussion about do we need an upswept exhaust or not. I don't think it is going anywhere. If it happens as an accessory, good. Do you need it? No.
Okay. So aside from the weight and the cost saving and the mass centralization, any other reason they stated why they didn't do it? Because that's the norm for all the ADVs, right?
Yeah, they basically said, look, we could save 2 kilos on the bike and we could mass centralize more. And it doesn't have a water problem, so why the hell do you need the exhaust there?
Because generally
as a traveler, mounting saddlebags and stuff, there is no exhaust there to burn anything. I think you actually earned something.
And would the Enduro and others have the exhaust on the side?
From whatever I can remember the picture, they all have them under the thing and a metal bash plate is standard. It's not a super thick.
It has a metal bash plate.
It's not a super thick metal bash plate. In fact, the Adventure R gets what looks like a much more comprehensive bash plate than the model we get. The X and the S get the same bash plate, what you're seeing in the pictures. But it's all metal. It's not half plastic and half metal like the Himalayans. It's also kind of weird because there's like lots of khali space on the right side of the motorcycle under the engine because it basically accounts for the exhaust. So the exhaust is, let's say, that thick where the pre-cat etc. is. That much khali jaga is there between the engine and the bash plate. So I was asking KTM, can you sell me an orange water tank that is shaped to fit into that? And they're like, orange water tank for what? But that's where the Dakar guys carry emergency water supply. I'd like to do that too.
Yeah, because just
and look, if you get to camp and your bike has hot water waiting for you to have a shower with and all, how can this be a bad thing?
Yeah, just from again, like if it were not there, it's just more protection. That's about it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So on the road, fuel efficiency is better than expected. And
yeah, I'm going to say most people expect about 24, 25. I just want to give you one caveat here. They've done some algorithmic mathematics with the range thing. So when you buy this bike brand new, you'll see some really odd range numbers. Like you'll say full tank 100 kilometers, 170 kilometers, all this nonsense is going to happen. Apparently the calibration can take as much as a half tank to be completed. Which means you'll get the bike with almost no fuel from the dealers. But when you ride home, you will have these weird range numbers show up. And until you get to half a tank, 150, 80 kilometers later, it will not actually start showing you range indicators. And then the quirks will continue. It doesn't seem to count range down continuously. It does it in steps of 10 as far as I can tell. So it'll say 380 and then it'll stay at 380 forever. Then suddenly it'll be 340. Then it'll be at 340 forever and it'll drop like this. And for whatever reason, I don't know what the thought process possibly could be when it falls below 80.
It sounds like a digital, it sounds like a digital gauge that's just doing physical gauge things.
Yeah. And when it falls below 80, even before the reserve indication actually comes on, then it goes to dash and good luck.
Say that again?
So range is falling, and you know the fuel is running down. And you'll see like this bike is capable of being fuel efficient because you'll have like a quarter of the tank left and your range will say 130 for a while.
Okay.
Then it will fall. And now you know it is coming, point reserve is coming. And from what I understand, reserve is about 80 kilometers of range. So when that range number falls to 80, then the range indicators just disappear. Now, do you think they replace it with a warning? Yes, it says reserve. But is there a F count, which is how many kilometers have you covered since reserve? No.
Nice. Jaldi kar.
It's the unnecessary pressure. I mean, you've got a 14-liter tank on a reasonably fuel-efficient motorcycle for this size. Why am I being pressured into fill gas all the time?
Okay. Interesting.
Right? And most manufacturers build 5-10 kilometers of buffer beyond that promised 80 anyway. I don't know what the thing is. I'd like to see my range. Okay, you painted in a different color. No, you put it in a bright yellow saying you're in trouble. You have only 80 kilometers to go. No, dash. I found that really odd. They shouldn't have done it, I think.
Yeah, that sounds very Worrisome.
And similarly, for a tourer, it doesn't have an external temperature readout. I found that was also odd. I couldn't find a way to display what's happening outside. And I use this because when you're traveling and you hit 4 degrees Celsius or lower, then you know the grip level will suddenly drop quite a bit. So you want to be a super extra cautious. Similarly, when the ambients go above 36, then you don't want all your gear to be receiving as much air as possible because it's overheating you. You'd like to tuck in a little bit, close vents if you can, etc., and get out of the hot air. But there's no indicator on this motorcycle as far as I can tell. But the new LCD is damn good. The numbers are bright and clear. The screen is super bright.
Same size, like the same design?
5 inches, same box, updated graphics, slightly updated menus. I think they'll also go back to the 390 Duke, this updated graphic thing. There are 4 segments at the bottom of the screen, which you can choose what you'd like to display, which I found really useful. Because, so during the testing process, I was looking at different numbers for the motorcycle. So right now I want to see trip 1, trip 2, average fuel economy and something. But then when you change something else, you could just change those. That was very useful. The switch cube on this side, if you remember from the KTM, had the D-pad with the buttons. Nice and clicky. Next to the hazard indicator, the cruise control button has appeared. You can use it to switch on and switch off cruise control. That's just the system, not actual cruise. Underneath the switchgear is a rocker switch. It's designed like this. So this is a minus facing the front of the motorcycle. This is a plus at the back. And you rock this to decide the speed. They've complicated their own life because right next to the plus button is the horn. So I have honked when I was trying to set cruise quite a bit. I have also set cruise quite a bit when I was trying to honk, which is why resuming from the front requires you to have a half-second press from your side. But if you use the other one instead to resume, it's instant. The problem is this is the actual resume button, and that actually goes 1 kmph slower and then resumes, which really annoyed me because my OCD, right?
And when you first turn it on, it
sets whatever speed you're at.
Quick
shifter is absolutely kick-ass. We'll come back to that. Cruise control works really well. You will hear a few complaints about when you cancel cruise control by touching the brake or clutch or whatever. The interruption seems a little bit abrupt. They're all like that. I have never seen a smooth cutout of cruise control because it basically instantly drops the throttle and hands off control to you, assuming that there would be a situation where you're in an emergency and making that path, the handoff control to be gradual and over a quarter of a second or whatever, it's not considered a good idea. So you will get used to it where you will be anticipating that drop in performance and you will take care of it. So not a problem. Normally when you want to overtake something, open the throttle, overtake, release, it'll go back to running cruise control just as normal, no surprises at all. Now, so at the bottom row of your switches are 3 buttons now. So the resume, then the horn, and then the C button. Okay, now the C button is a custom button, which on most motorcycles will come preset to change riding modes. But the top 2 buttons of the D-pad are also shortcut buttons, which you can set to any shortcut you like. So until I spotted the C button, I was running my top button as mode change. But in theory, what you could do is you could set ABS traction control and mode change on 3 shortcuts and just like not go into the menu and just change them. KTM also has given you really flexible menus. So you can, you have 3 throttle maps called rain, street and off-road, which are the 3 riding modes, rain, street, off-road. And you can configure off-road being the top mode and I am out on the highway touring, what difference it make to my life. So I went into off-road mode and switched all the settings off and I got back to traction control on, ABS on, etc, etc. No stress, it remembers. So if you turn off everything, you're going off-road and you stall the bike and you wake up, all the settings are still where you left them. Awesome.
Wow.
Sorted.
And how are the modes?
Rain can feel almost sleepy. Like you'll be riding on a straight road with almost dry tarmac. It will find like the small grain of sand and suddenly the traction control will wake up. So it's very sensitive. But it's also sleepy. It doesn't give you performance well. And just like they did with the Duke, it actually makes less performance overall. But they've never given the number out. And what we did with Harley Davidson when they stopped giving the number out is we just assumed a random number, right? So we said the Fat Boy makes 922 bhp. I mean, why the hell not? Or 9 bhp if you prefer. In the same way, in rain mode, peak horsepower is 6. At least feels like 6. But the other 2 throttle maps, the street map and the off-road map, they both produce full power. The street map is more gentle at the bottom and builds up to the top, whereas the off-road map is straight. Neither of these 2 are as frantic and urgent as KTMs are generally. So the first time you ride it, street will feel slow.
Interesting.
Especially if you're in the situation where I was, where you take the bike and you're straight on the highway and you're in street mode, you'd feel like, it's not going. You're not going slowly. You have the sense of it's not accelerating. What is this bike doing? Right?
It's not needling you to go faster.
Correct. And in my head, the top mode being off-road is just backwards. And if the only guys who can make this justifiable is the KTM guys because they're nuts. Right? So your top mode and your most direct, most aggressive mode is off-road, and it is nowhere close to as aggressive as the Duke is. So it's purposeful, it is calculated, it can accelerate really well. Overtaking is no challenge at all. It's a tractable motor reasonably, so you can accelerate out of situations quite easily. You will not notice any of this, but at no point will you see this, my God, this motorcycle is just mad angry. It's not.
Is it also because the wheelbase is longer that it's just feeling more?
It's all of it. It's the ignition map, it's the extra weight, it is the weight being compensated by the sprocket, which might be why the refinement is a little bit behind the Duke in some ways. But the wheelbase went up 40 millimeters, most of it from the swing arm, so it's not a small change. So it has just become a calmer motorcycle. So first I thought, little bit sleepy. But the more the miles accumulated, I said, no, it's a travel motorcycle. Its job is to be composed, is to be purposeful, is to be at peace so that your brain consumption, your energy consumption as you ride is not maximized. Really, really enjoyed it.
Awesome. And this is now, I mean, I feel like we've covered everything I want to know about the engine. Suspension.
So the suspension is adjustable. And KTM always gives you 3 settings. They did it for the Duke, they've done it for this. There's a comfort setting, there is a middle setting, and there's a sport setting. I tried all 3. It is not going to feel as plush as the Himalayan. The Himalayan has a silky smoothness to it. Those kind of square edge small bumps, the KTM does not do as well as the Himalayan. But to me, it's more a difference in approach than a superiority thing. The KTM's approach is, I need you to know what's going on so you can control your experience. And therefore, I will give you feedback. But it is absorbing everything, right? So I was coming out of Goa, and there's a road that goes up the Anuskura, which you can access through 3 routes. The first one is Kharepatan, which is the longest of these detours. The second one is from Rajapur, which is about 12 kilometers, and the third one is from Oni, which is the best surfaced of all these through. So I went through Rajapur, and it's like an old...
That's the narrow road which goes through the village areas.
It's an old, unmaintained village road, which is pretty bumpy. There are pothole sections, etc., etc. And at no point, I slowed down for cows, I slowed down for people, I slowed down because the river's next door and it's a really pretty place at dawn. But I never slowed down because the bike said you should really slow down. And the bike just didn't care. So I have thudded through potholes to the point where yesterday I caught myself aiming for the potholes. And every time I'd hit a pothole, I'll reduce compression further and rebound further to see what happens. And when you run it at fully open circuits, so the front has, and only the front because I can't really reach back because if not given a, I wish they'd given a rotary knob. So my KTM 390 Duke has a R6 shock with a rotary rebound. You can actually reach down and just set rebound on the go if you feel like it, which obviously this bike can't. You have to sit down and take a screwdriver and do it. But when I opened the circuits fully, then finally the motorcycle was like, what the hell are you doing? And it made some nasty noises and it felt bad. But the comfort setting is a really good setting. The full
So what do you mean by comfort setting?
Basically, you back off the compression and preload by a known amount.
Which they have shared?
Which they have shared. It's on your airbox cover. It's on the, it's not an airbox cover actually. It's the cover, it's a very neat underseat area. And there's a plastic cover that covers the fuses and all of that stuff. On top of which is a big white sticker that says, here's your preload. Here's, yeah. It was also there on the Duke. I'll put up the picture of the sticker. And you basically do that many clicks. And you find 3 good settings and you can fine tune further if you like. When you want to adjust preload, you're going to have to take one body panel off. So the preload collars at the top, rebound screws at the bottom. So it's very easy to adjust your rebound if you have a screwdriver. But if you want to adjust your preload, which you should set sag on a motorcycle with this much travel and this much compliance. It will help you. If you want to do that, you're going to have to remove the side panel.
All right.
So this side panel comes off for airbox. That side panel comes off preload.
Okay. So the
really good suspension.
So the last thing for me is Anushkara.
I didn't suffer. The tires are grippy. You're going to ask me about the axial brakes. I don't care. These are good brakes. So the brakes worked. The tires worked. This is still a lightweight, pointy motorcycle that goes where you point it. Could you achieve bigger lean angles with the Duke? Yes. Could you have more corner speed with the Duke? Yes. But will you be out on a highway, find a corner and say, yeah, man, this adventure, I'm not enjoying myself? No, I don't think you are.
When you see a corner, will you light up a bit?
Yeah.
Sorted.
That's why I selected Anuskura. Like there are other ghats where you do one ghat and you're done and you're out on the highway, right? This is 3 ridges to cross, so you have the ghats keep coming back. To the point where I was at the Shell on the other side, and from there I had a choice of coming back via Lonavala Saturday afternoon or going via Tamini.
So you did do Tamil.
And I really considered Tamini until I met 2 kids, MotorInc fans, who basically came and said, Saturday, Tamini, don't go because in the afternoon the car guys are still there. And they had heard of 3 crashes at Tamini that morning from friends. So I thought, since I've had a very nice, 600 kilometers, no, 450 kilometers at that point, and I had another 150 to go to Mumbai, why take a chance? I could always do it the other day, right? And which is what I did. I did it the other day.
Nice.
Yeah. So happy in the corners. And I'm saying it's a travel motorcycle. It's not a cornering demon.
Yeah.
It's not meant to be. So will you go into a corner and say, oh, no, it's not that.
And does it have that same ADV swingy kind of feel? Or
Yes, it is sharp, it is narrow, and initially it starts to drop to a lean angle. You get used to that feeling, and after that it is a predictable thing. But the first time you ride it, it will feel like it's like take a scale, like a ruler, take a scale and do that. It has that kind of weightless initial, and then it stabilizes a little bit. It's nice. Heavy lean angles, they will feel like it. Remember, when you sit tall, your lean angles feel exaggerated. Are you leaning all that much over? No, you won't be. But is there any restriction as to how far you can lean over? Honestly, no.
But one thing, with all that suspension travel, braking hard?
There is dive. Did I think it was a ridiculous amount of dive? No.
But
when
itself?
When I started to go up on the compression and rebound circuits, then you can create more support under braking if you want.
But the brakes, because that's often been...
So the reason why they're saying they didn't give radial calipers on this is because the initial bite becomes too strong quite easily and it becomes harder to tune for them. The axial brakes generally have a softer bite because of the nature of the design. So it has a softer initial followed by a lot of performance, and I found it was easy to modulate. Yes, on the comfort setting, lots of dive. Was I uncomfortable with the... No, I was expecting it, honestly.
No, the reason I asked was because when there's dive, plus, let's say, at one time, the first gen Duke, it used to have a slightly grabby feel, which in this kind of a scene would not feel good.
It's a beautiful set of brakes. The guys who are worrying about axial versus radial are primarily fighting against their spec sheets. In the real world, these are natural, progressive, strong brakes. You can choose how strongly you want to use this brake. You can modulate that pressure carefully. ABS will kick in, but I could almost predict when ABS was going to kick in too. So we are in a good place.
So the SMC should definitely be fun then.
SMC should be humongous amounts of fun because you'll have far better tires. It will be far better for cornering, and you'll get far better road tires with it. Remember, I'm riding what I'd call, let's say, 80-20 or a 70-30 tire, where it's only doing 20% off-road. But on Anuskura's corners, which are clean tarmac corners, you're losing 30% of what this tire would have done. If I were a touring person, would I get the Adventure? I would. But would I run a semi-knobbly, a semi-off-road pattern like this? No, I'd just go to a full-on road tire. Why not?
Okay. Now, all stray afterthoughts. In terms of dimensions, we only spoke about the wheelbase, which is, you said 30 mm longer. 40 mm longer. And overall, it's a much longer motorcycle as well.
Not much longer. It feels like it.
Oh, it's not a much longer motorcycle.
Dimensionally, if you park it next to a 390 Adventure, the old one, would you think that this motorcycle has become substantially longer? It will feel like it, but when you start measuring it out, it won't actually bear out. It is taller for sure because the front fairing is now very tall, etc. And when you park it next to the Himalayan, from some angles, this can look like a much smaller motorcycle also because the Himalayan is just longer, taller, handlebars at a higher place, etc. So remember, the Himalayan handlebar comes up high because the tank rises up. This tank only comes up a little bit in the handlebar. Some people said you might need risers if you're riding off-road and all of that. Please do not take these conclusions as given conclusions because they are your conclusions. Ride the bike. If you think you need risers, put risers. If you think the bike doesn't need risers, don't put risers. It's not a big deal.
Okay, cool.
Right? Plastic handguards, adjustable levers, excellent mirrors. Lots of people have been wondering about the headlight. It's a good headlight. It's just adjusted too high as stock because legal. And this is a bike with long travel suspension, so it pitches quite a bit. So if you ride fast, you're probably going to be pitched upwards, which means your rear end is squatted. Your headlight is going to point at the sky a lot. You need to adjust it down, which is what I would do. If you ride calmly, I would still adjust it down a little bit and bring the headlight closer. So as stock, I think it's a really bright headlight, but the way it comes adjusted, you're not going to think that that's going to happen. The only odd thing in there is when you switch on the high beam, which is really powerful, they somehow want to dim the low beam, which I don't understand. Why should you have to do that on an LED? Maybe it's because they put a box and now the heat sinks can't keep up with both the elements being on together, but they're projector units, they work really well. The low beam is nice and bright even at the current adjustment. I would actually adjust it lower, which would make it less flashy, because the cutoff keep moving in and out of people's vision. They keep thinking I'm flashing them. So I want to reduce that.
Okay.
As soon as I do that, the high beam, which you can see spearing off into the sky, will also fall to the ground. Nice.
Okay. So crash guard?
Crash guard is standard.
Okay.
Which has a little slider built into it also. You don't need to spend money on that.
Slider?
Please do not cover your bike in
slider.
plumbing. It's not required. These are not brittle plastics. They're not going to break that easily. I would make very few upgrades. One, I'd put a fork seal cover on this fork for sure. One. Two, I would have aluminium backed handguards, not just these plastic things. So I'd get barkbusters, honestly, the actual original barkbusters, not whatever copy people are selling right now. I would not get those. And there's no logical way to mount luggage on this motorcycle. The grab rail is an open grab rail, so it doesn't close on itself, etc., etc. So you might have to do a little bit of work there. KTM is working on a rack that you can buy and add back to the motorcycle, but it has not been released yet. They will use the 4 bolts that I used to mount the grab rail, and you'll get a cantilevered rack off that. But that rack itself is not out yet.
Rack?
Yeah, a tail rack behind the seat is not out yet.
Okay.
And KTM said if there's enough people complaining about it and they think a shorter accessory screen might be needed, they'll think about it. A lot of the off-road guys were wondering, the screen is so tall, I might hit my head on it. Everybody failed to hit their head on it as far as I can tell, including also Chaco, our friend. So I don't think that this may be such a big issue, but because the screen is this tall, if you're riding in the rain, for example, and the thing gets caked up in mud, obviously it's going to block off a lot of your vision. Right? For what it's worth, I crossed from Goa into Maharashtra at pre-dawn, let's call it, darkness, and I had around 20 kilometers of really, really thick fog. And in that thick fog, having to clean my visor constantly because of the condensation, I didn't really have a visual interruption, but when I came out the other side, my entire screen was splattered with some amount of gum.
Okay.
Quick summary.
Quick summary.
This is way too long.
I think quick summary. One sec. I'm bracing myself for the quick summary. KTM's 390 Adventure is here now, and this is the first 390 Adventure. The previous one was a Duke dressed up. It was dressed up.
Abomination.
There we go. So that's the bottom line of what this new bike is. It's a true KTM. It's meant, I mean, KTM's genes are from adventure. And
from off-road, yeah.
And they have built a bike which has effectively got the bones of a great dirt bike, which in some form and fashion will come later. And this is the more mass appeal motorcycle right now of the adventure family that we're going to get, which includes the X. This is the S that Shumi spoken about today. There's going to be the Adventure R and then the Enduro R. So this is the one that will work for most people as a bike that you can travel with primarily and also go rough roading with. For those people who want to step up and really take their already significantly evolved off-road game to the next level, Wait. That's going to be the next set of motorcycles that you're going to get in the Adventure family. And yes, as a motorcycle, this is built on the base of the Duke. So the engine is the same. There's a difference to the ignition maps. But other than that, there's no difference mechanically. The frame is obviously different. This is a longer motorcycle in terms of wheelbase. It's a bike which wears different wheel sizes. It's got a 21-inch front wheel and a 17-inch rear, both of which are spoke wheels and are tubeless spokes. This is a system that's been designed and patented by KTM, and it has a special set of wheels which look similar to regular spoke wheels but have an adaptation to take this system. And it's a cost-effective and simple solution that KTM India can use practically without any hesitation or any limitations, right? From the chassis standpoint, it's a very slim bike. It's got an incredibly accessible seat height, especially when you consider the amount of ground clearance on offer, which is more than the older 390 Adventure, while the seat height is actually lower. And as Shumi put it, it's a gain of about 60 millimeters because you've gained about you've gained about 40
30
something.
नीचे 30 ऊपर.
Acha, 30 niche and 30 upar in terms of the seat height going down by 30 mm and the ground clearance going up by 30 mm. So it's a motorcycle that finally talks about being accessible, can be accessible because it's not going to feel that tall for actually having the kind of off-road credentials you'd be looking for from a bike from KTM. And that's, I think, a great first step when you look at it on paper. On top of that, the other thing that Shumi highlighted is that the suspension now feels good. This is not a suspension that's trying to work for a compromised chassis, so it can work freely. It feels plush. At the same time, it's not too plush, so you feel what's happening underneath, and that means you're connected with what's going on when you're going over rough roads. On the road, it feels calm. Earlier, it wouldn't kind of settle down. It would feel a bit jittery. This bike is not like that. Combined with the engine, combined with the new chassis, the longer wheelbase, the overall sense, as Shumi said, was between 80 to 120 kilometers an hour. It feels like a motorcycle you want when you're spending time out on the highway.
Yeah, and let me just reiterate the point here. This will not feel like a fast motorcycle until you get used to it. Then you will realize how fast you're going. But it is a fast motorcycle and is designed to have really strong mid-range. Like all the numbers Bajaj has quoted, I'll put up some of them if you like. They're all about how fast this motorcycle accelerates in the mid-range where you're doing a speed and you need to overtake something, open the throttle and get there. I kept downshifting because I wanted to ride it like that. But when I got lazier in that 31 kpl stretch, I got a little bit lazy.
So I was just going to come to that this is a bike, in some senses, is the KTM we expected. And that is that it reaches out a hand towards you and says, come on, I'll take you to a higher plane. You step up your game.
It does that off-road all the time.
Right? So when you're riding a bike as big as this, wherever you're going, it'll give you that sense of confidence. The one area where it doesn't feel very KTM as we are used to is the engine, where it just feels a little bit more calm. Not exactly calm, but more restrained, especially in the normal mode, ride mode, not train, the one in between, which is street. And that just feels like it's a bit chill. And then you go to the off-road mode where it's got the same amount of power, but just a higher level of responsiveness. And there it feels immediately more engaging, but still not wild.
That's what I would actually want KTM to just throw in the one even wilder mode just for the heck of it, saying this is just to scare you.
I think that will come as enduro mode. So that will go with full brap.
Yeah.
Because I think the reason why they wouldn't do that right now with that is probably the fuel efficiency, because that 14 liter tank is what we were talking about. Is on paper, it seems like a little too little for a bike of this kind, which is meant to be traveled with. And but the surprising bit is that the claimed fuel efficiency is 26 kmpl, but Shumi did a 250 kilometer run, which included a climb up the Deccan Plateau, including a lot of twisties, lots of twisties, and then the highway, in which he calculated, not indicated, he calculated to have it done 31 kilometers to a liter, which is...
Yeah, I was frankly...
Which is frankly...
I frankly thought my calculator was broken.
I'm taken aback.
And then finally I gave credit to myself for losing tons of weight because must be because I'm so light.
So the fuel efficiency might be a concern on paper, the range might be a concern on paper, but basis Shumi's experience and a total of 1200 kilometers with it, that's not the thing that's...
Yeah, and remember, this is a sensitive motorcycle. You will see 19 if you ride aggressively enough, and you will see 31 if you ride well.
Right.
Both are possible. For a lot of time during this trip, we have seen consistent 25s. I'm not saying 31 is the expectation. 25s are the expectation. 31 is possible.
And which is why he said that you can do over 300 kilometers on a tank full easy, right? So I think for most people, that's enough range for your normal travel itinerary as well. The only thing in the travel itinerary that you will want to check out if you're a person with a wider frame is the seat itself, because Shumi said while he was on the seat, he felt that his sit bones were already on the edge of the seat. It didn't prove to be a problem. It's a combination of the seat, the suspension. He was comfortable. It's a nice stance also. The handlebars not too far up. the handlebar is not too wide. It's a nice direct kind of feel is how I'm interpreting what he explained the stance to be. So when you're sitting there in a fairly upright position, what you are getting is that the seat can feel a bit narrow. So some of you who have wider frames will want to keep a lookout for that. And the seat in the same way, like this is, if you look at it from the rear, you'll get that dirt bike connection to it. The seat is slim as it tapers towards the rear. And so for carrying pillions, you should check it out before you decide to get it for something to travel with your partner as the default, right? And in that one regard, it may not be as good as the previous 390 Adventure, although the suspension will make up for a lot of it.
Yeah, to me, if you were to ask me, default travel motorcycle for India, go anywhere, no matter what's going on the road, I'm pretty sure the 390 Adventure is unbeatable already. But if you were to say, no, but I want to do this with my partner, then I would tell you, ride the 390 Adventure, but I think you'll find that the Himalayan is a better suited motorcycle for that just because it has more space.
And since the Himalayan came up, in terms of refinement, this engine isn't as smooth as the 390 Duke. It's not as, I mean, not that the 390 Duke sounds nice, but it doesn't sound even as KTM-ish as that. It's a slightly different, more metallic, mechanical kind of sound as what I understood. And Shumi said that if it was smoother, it would have taken a step forward, right? Just felt more refined overall. And which is why in that 80 to 120 kilometer speed range, the good thing is that it calms down. It smoothens out. That's its sweet spot, which is in the 5,000 RPM. 6,000 RPM range. So that's the good thing. When you're traveling, it will feel good. Aside from that, the brakes are axial brakes, and that seems like a step back. But KTM say that it's been done so that it's a more comforting braking feel. So at start, it's not too sharp. And with that travel, you might find it might feel intimidating for some people, but that won't be the case with this, where it feels a little soft at first and then the full power comes on. So it will feel more friendly for more people. And I think when you're riding off-road, it will help a lot. Because you will be able to modulate a little bit better with this. And you are getting a fair bit of electronics with, actually fair bit, you're getting a lot of electronics with this as standard, including cruise control, which Shumi said has an on-off switch and a toggle near the under the switch cubes, which is where the horn also is, to adjust the speed at which you want to set cruise control, and can get a bit fiddly when you're trying to use the horn or the other way around. But on the whole, even the electronics, whether it's the ride modes or the controls, you have a lot of customization available, which makes it easy to run through whatever settings you want while on the go. And it sounded to me like a modern take on how electronics should be on bikes like these, which I haven't heard of in any of the recent bikes, at least that we've spoken
So when
of.
you ride a Himalayan and a 390 Adventure back to back, big picture, you're riding a modern bike now.
Yeah.
It's got all of those check boxes in place that you need for touring. Would you need cruise control for touring? Yes, you would. Indian highways are getting 4-lane, big, long, straight sections. You don't want to sit like this, it gets exhausting. I'd like to run traction. Why do you need traction control? Because we do remain an unpredictable road surface country where stuff happens. Right? Yesterday, I think it happened. There was some weird stuff going on the right, so I went, there was a truck here who suddenly slowed down. I had no place to go, but I went right. And what I realized was the guy in front of him had completely stopped, like at a speed breaker, Tata Safari, white side Tata Safari. The other truck guy was on the phone and hadn't spotted this whole thing. So they started to slow down too late. But I had no choice but to cut across the Safari, who wasn't moving even then. But when I did that and I opened the throttle, on the other side of the speed breaker, there was sand there. Right? A Himalayan in that situation, because traction control is too modern, would have spun up and I would have had to deal with it. Not that I can't, but I would have had to. On the KTM, it's 2 flashlights and I'm out of that situation.
And on that note, he also spoke about the Apollo tramplers, which come with this 390 Adventure. And well, that says
excellent. Absolutely excellent.
Everything that needs to be said. Plus, he also did say that you have the underlying safety net of traction control to help you out in all kinds of tricky conditions, which just makes it a better all-rounder really in my books, because this is a motorcycle you will travel quickly on, you will travel quickly over unfamiliar roads on, and there that additional safety net is good to have.
Yeah, and think about it like this. I know NH66 Goa highway is bumpy concrete. I know the inner roads will be in various kinds of disrepair. Happens. I know they might be in great shape. I know there'll be 4-lane roads in there and 1-lane roads in there. I know there'll be sections where I will have no choice but to go into a soft shoulder, or there'll be a bridge under construction. I will have to go into the dirt and come out, which I don't like. I don't like riding in the dirt, right? And there'll be a 4-lane section on the other side. And if I have that little section of the expressway to negotiate between Mumbai and Pune, that will be 6 lanes and slippery. And then there'll be traffic every day to work. I ride 54 kilometers a day. Now I'm trying to think, where would the 390 Adventure have difficulties? Nowhere. That's the beauty of this motorcycle. I'm not impressed with its cornering. I'm not impressed with its fundamental off-road ability. But when you put the whole package together and say, it does every one of these jobs so easily, this is a great single bike garage. That's the key to this.
And that's, I think, the bottom line that I was coming to, that at no point when talking about this bike did Shumi seem to go, my God,
No,
what have they
it's
done?
not that bike.
They haven't
I'm telling
done
you,
that.
I'm more in love with this bike 1200 kilometers later than I was 100 kilometers in, then I was 300 kilometers in, then I was 400 kilometers in. Every single mile that has gone under my wheels, I've said, oh wow, it does this so easily.
And in that, what he said right at the start, that this is a special variant for India. And I think KTM have done the right thing to build this motorcycle for the Indian conditions, for the Indian riders, because I think this is what most people will enjoy, and enjoy it, like you said, the more you use it. It's not a motorcycle that goes brap. It's not a motorcycle that's going to go plowing through all the wild stuff in remarkable fashion, but for everybody else, for everything else, it's going to bike that's going to feel like home.
And honestly, you can brap and do all of the nonsense you want on this bike if you want to. It's just, my sense of this bike is it was built for a job. It does that job really well. That's primary focus. The rest of that KTM edgy madness, it's a lot less than normal. I'm not going to say it's not there. It's very much there. This bike does 153 kilometers an hour flat out. Most people have seen 160 something on their odometer readouts. Did I feel the need to test this out at any point because the KTM was provoking me to go faster? No. But did I not know that when I was doing that calm stretch, I was still traveling really rapidly through the world? I knew it. When I came out onto the highway to Pune, that's at Karad to Pune, long straight stretches. I had cruise control on, and I did cruise control at 75 kilometers an hour when traffic was a little thicker. And I moved that up to 110 when the traffic opened up a little bit. At any point, did I think I was doing something unnecessary? No. But we were still going very effectively through time and space. And to me, that's why I keep telling you, to me, this is a travel bike that does off-road really well. If you want the other side of the balance, wait, the other bike will come.
In this not so short summary, I think we'll cap off that this is all the more incredible because it costs 6,000 rupees more than the previous bike.
Yeah.
For all the additional ability, equipment, and the true spirit of adventure, which we would have expected from KTM.
Now, so the price jump from the Duke 390, in case you're considering those two motorcycles, is going to sound big because Adventure X and the Duke are roughly the same price. So you're going to jump 65,000-70,000 rupees to this motorcycle. And to me, the additional electronics that this motorcycle has over the X, the additional suspension travel it has over the Duke, it does make it a far superior travel motorcycle without becoming unwieldy around town, which has been a common complaint about, oh, Himalayan is just too big. I would tell you, if you do intend to travel, this is a better travel motorcycle than a Duke.
Finally, yeah.
But if you want to travel a little and have a lot of fun, the Duke will travel. It's not bad at it. KTM has two very good options going around the Himalayan like this. I'm impressed. Now, I would like to move on to questions.
So we're done with the quick summary, and now
we have 700 questions on circles, out of which I've picked up what I think we wouldn't have spoken about. So we'll quickly run through it. These are in no particular order. I have scanned all 600 comments. I didn't leave a single one of you out, and the replies, I've checked everything. These are the things that I think are worth discussing in terms of gaps we've left in what we've said. First is from Dr. Ranadhish, you know him. Doc says, as you've ridden the Honda CB500X before and you've always said it's a great bike, although the 390 Adventure and the Honda are different bikes, how does the engine feel different from single to twin? Thank you very much for bringing this up. While having the same roughly amount of power, how is the feeling and is the Honda worth the extra money? Now first, the Honda is not worth the extra money because it's no way that the CB500X, which is now called the NX500, is 2 times as good as the KTM, but it's nearly 2 times the price. So let's get that out of the way. The CB500X is an incredible motorcycle. Personally, I think it's the best Honda that is being made on earth today. But is it worth the money that they sell it in India? No, absolutely not. But this question is an important one because to me, we are at the upper edge of where single cylinder engines are going to go. If you look at all the 40-ish bhp 400cc class engines in India, they all have refinement challenges. The Triumphs are the smoothest below 6000 rpm of this whole lot. Above 6000 rpm, they feel strained and they feel whiny and they feel kind of annoying. I've said this. The Duke smoothens out as the revs climb, but because it does that, it's vibrating at the bottom a little bit, and a lot of people get not so happy about it. Same engine, lower gearing in the Adventure chassis. You don't have the sense of it having a smooth engine, although where it is required to be smooth at highway speeds, this is a smooth enough engine. Himalayan smooths from the beginning, but by 4,500-5,000 rpm vibration starts, and then it doesn't actually go away till you hit the other side. They're all going to have the same issue because there's one basic giant piston going up and down. Every time it reaches the top, it slows to a stop. That's TDC. Every time it goes down, it accelerates and then slows to a stop, BTDC. You will feel this as a shaking vibration, which you can do some amount of work with a counterbalancer, but every counterbalancer consumes performance. So you keep tuning it up, you keep making a weaker engine. So to me, we are at the end of this game. Are you going to see a 500 single? Maybe. Are you going to love the 500 single? No, you're not.
You already have a 650 single, but 650 single, as you know, has a certain persona and a personality, which is why it works for a certain kind of motorcycle, like it's in the BSA right now, and that's more the retro feels.
And it actually can work because it's not a highly tuned engine. The more they tune that engine, the more vibration will become. I'll tell you this, everybody sees pictures of the 690 Duke, 690 SMC, 690 Enduro. I say, oh, you ride it, the vibration will end your thrills right there, unless you're expecting them. Right now, we're seeing the crossover to twins happen thanks to Aprilia. Okay, so this Adventure is sitting at 3.6. At 3.9 is the Tuono twin, and at 4.2 is the RS457. To me, the Touring will come. My feeling, and the Touring should sit another 15,000-20,000 rupees above this, depending on what Aprilia does with the suspension. I do not believe that they're going to give you adjustability and all of this. They will give you front preload at best. They'll give you rear preload at best. They are not going to do more than this, is my feeling. As soon as you ride the twin, you have the opportunity to smoothen the vibration out because the cylinders can help each other with vibration. One, and because you have two cylinders firing, you can make a lot more performance if you want to, without the smoothness going away. So if these single cylinder 40 bhp motorcycles are annoying you in terms of refinement, then you should wait for a twin. The biggest advantage the CB500X has over the 390 Adventure, to answer your question, Doc, is because it's a twin cylinder engine, it's a much smoother engine. It's a beautiful motorcycle to ride. I absolutely adore how the CB500X feels, but 4.2 lakh rupees on road for the KTM versus 7.5, 7.6 for the Honda. No.
Yeah, if you have a more road bias, then definitely the twins formats will be the next evolution, the next sweet spot to be.
And I would not be surprised if KTM has twins in the works too. Because I'm telling you, we are at the end of the single cylinder lineup, which means the next logical step is
because always the singles have been the pure part of Adventure, because they are light, they are slim. So people who really want to go off-road, for them, this is the ultimate format.
Yeah. And you learn to live with that vibration. I'm telling you this. And it occurred to me because somebody was going on and on about vibration in my DMs. And I was thinking about how much does the vibration of the Himalayan annoy me today versus when I first experienced it. It doesn't annoy me today, I'm used to it.
Yeah.
Is it ideal? Maybe not. But is it something that I think about the Himalayan every single day? No, I think about, my God, what suspension? What would I do if the suspension was adjustable? What the hell would I change?
What a chassis.
Nothing.
Yeah.
What do I remember about the KTM 1200 kilometers data? It's not how non-smooth the engine can feel in certain rev ranges. I don't remember these things. I say there's that pothole that punishes every test vehicle that we've tested over the last 3 years. The KTM doesn't take any notice of it only. It's just like when you get like a notification report saying pothole was hit. And that's brilliant.
Okay.
M Risant 7. Would the traction control and other safety features, apart from whatever, be a deal breaker for someone with a 20 bhp bike? Is scaling up better, or should one go with the above mentioned? What do you think? Do electronics prevent people from learning how to ride a motorcycle? That's the question.
Oh, no.
They don't. To me, electronics are an invisible safety net. The amount of guts you would have to say, I want to figure out the limit of traction by opening the throttle to full and seeing when traction control cuts in, I'm willing to bet that on this planet, there might be about, 150 youngsters who will have the guts to do that. So, will electronics interfere with your learning process? No. So to me, electronics do not interfere with your ability to learn. That's a very extreme end case situation which can happen. When you get there, turn the electronics off. There's no harm in it.
And it actually will help you learn more because
you can step over the limit and realize, oh, wow, that was a real cock up, and come back. Right? Yeah. Rushikesh Karmale, does it have luggage and pillion carrying capacity like the previous gen Adventure? In terms of payload, yes. And it is designed as a touring bike. I asked. They have 4 power outlets on this motorcycle where you can draw extra power from, so you can add accessories. It's designed in. The alternator has 40 watts of overdraw available after every single electrical system is simultaneously being used. They still have 40 watts left.
oh wow.
So they have designed it with travel in mind. I asked, but will it be as easy to fit a pillion on this bike as it would with the previous Adventure? Comfort wise, from the suspension side, yes. Space wise versus one, no. But I think it's harder to solve the suspension thing than the seat thing. So if I had a partner and we decided to go out touring on the bike together and this is the bike that we chose, we'd spend a lot of time at a seat guy working out a solution, but I don't believe it is unworkable. Aditya Khapre, fuel tank mouth have a horizontal rod that spills fuel everywhere. No, it doesn't. The old one had that rod and it causes lots of spillage. This one doesn't. Between a sports bike and an ADV, options are RS457 and the S model of the 390 Adventure. Main concern is the city experience. Think about it like this. This will make it very easy for you to think about. A lot of people think ADVs are so large you won't go into the city with them. But if I were to say MotorInc's having a giveaway and you win the 390 Adventure and you can only ride it in the city, would you return that bike? I suspect that you would say no. You'll get used to it. It's not that big a deal. I've been riding my Multistrada regularly. And yes, you might say, oh, you've been riding for 20 years and I'm experienced. I also started riding a big bike in traffic at some point. And at some point I came to the conclusion saying, it's not that different from riding a smaller bike.
If you want a city bike, why not the Duke?
Right? And now, if you have ambitions of track days or touring, at the beginning of your track days, Adventure 390 will do just fine at the racetrack. You'll have to learn a bit and get a bit faster before you say, okay, a 21-inch front wheel and a racetrack do not mix. That will take a while. You'll be able to make that decision. But if track days are priority for you, there's no reason why the RS457 can't tour. The stock clip-ons will be too low. Change them. Right?
If track days are part of your agenda, then 100% RS457 and live with the rest of it, whatever it is.
You can't have one bike do all the things amazingly. You can decide what is the highest priority for you and then find a bike that does that really well and then accept that the rest of it will be dealt with in some fashion or form. Right? Sukh with lots of Ks and lots of Hs. Current 250 Duke Gen 3 Ono. Does this generate the same feeling while riding, like confidence and control? Absolutely, yes, it does. This is an uncomplicated motorcycle to ride. It's a friendly motorcycle to ride. And just like the Dukes always have, when you start pushing it, you have this sense of they're supporting you, they're supporting you, they're supporting you. And there is a fine line that you will always be able to tell beyond which you're stepping into madness. And at that point, it will magnify the madness. This bike does not have that magnifying thing. It does not go full mad on you. Lots of support, lots of capability, and lots of performance, no doubt about it. He's also wondering about ADVs as a group of formats. A lot of people discount ADVs for what they look like. They're not that complicated to ride. Remember, ADVs were born as old people's machines where they wanted to do many things, but they didn't have the bodies to do them with. They're actually an uncomplicated motorcycle to ride. In this height and weight and all that, you'll get used to it. The fastest way to do this, to me, rent an ADV for a weekend and go. Most cities in India, there seem to be people who are renting out at least Himalayan 411s, if nothing else. These bikes, the 390 Adventures, will also show up in those places. Rent one, go for a ride. You'll get a clean sense of it. Trying to work this out on the internet, I'm not sure you'll reach the right conclusions always.
Has he stated how old he is?
He's a young kid, I think. He's not stated, but he's a young, because he's saying the 250 is his first ever personal bike.
And he's looking to step up to an ADV.
He's saying, should I think about ADVs? And we get this a lot. Right? To me, at the beginning of your career, you should step up to everything that you can. And if rentals are the fastest way to do it, rent them.
And he has a 250 Duke right now. Okay.
Older 390 was an excellent tourer. I beg to differ. 2-up plus luggage. Yes, it was. How much of this quality has the new one gained and lost? Far superior motorcycle. Not so great 2-up. 2-up today, your old 390 Adventure, the Himalayan will make it look like a average motorcycle at best. So, sorry, but I know I'm being super uncomplimentary about the old bike, but I have ridden them.
I mean, see, today when you ride those two bikes back to back, do this again, because we've always called it out as not, and his view was hilarious about it. But today, when you ride those two back to back, you will understand why we said what we said.
Yeah.
Right? Today, it will seem crystal clear, but there was a reason for it.
Yeah. John Moses asking what accessories are available with this bike. The crash guard is standard on this motorcycle. You will get a screen that will go in front of the headlight to protect it from debris damage. It will be easier to clean also in the process. That's one. You get a full mud guard instead of the half mud guard that you got on the front wheel, and you can buy a center stand if you like. I wouldn't. Lights are being considered. Should they be adding the lights or not? But KTM's, one of the things I love about them is they're always like a little bit of a Lego set where various parts of various bikes fit onto various bikes. So as this range fills out and other products start to show up, remember underneath the core of the frame and the engine is exactly the same. So I think you should be able to swap sprockets in and out if you feel like. You'll be able to change bodywork if you feel like. Like we were discussing in the office saying this half orange, half white, do we like this color scheme or not? I said, what difference does it make? Go to KTM and buy the white panels from the other KTM and put them. They're never expensive. So Raghav Suhas, Gen 1 Adventure 390, past 3 years, done lots of highway travels, including off-road trails. He has decided to pick up new Adventure 390 considering capability, but he's 6 foot and would love to travel along with a taller setup with a more off-road focused bike. In that case, should you consider the Adventure R or settle for this motorcycle since he already has the Gen 1? He's not in a hurry, can wait as long as a year if needed to wait for the Adventure R. If off-roading is bigger on your agenda, just wait. There's absolutely no doubt. I think the S is capable enough for most people, but touring first, off-road after. If you want to switch this, just wait for the R. Simple. And if you're 6 foot tall, the seat height is not going to bother you. If you're not 6 foot tall, you can learn how to deal with a tall seat. Honestly, that's not really a limitation. Dhiren Thakkar, 3 questions. Appreciate answer. Specific performance aspects of the 390 Adventure that let you down? Not really. I think if this engine was smoother, the whole motorcycle would feel a little bit more cohesive. Do I have a sense of it being an unrefined motorcycle? I do not. But the suspension is so smooth, the behavior and the manners are so smooth. At highway speeds, the engine itself is so smooth, the quick shifter is so buttery. I mean, it's one of the best quick shifters, honestly, up and down the order. If in the middle of that, there is a little bit of vibration from the engine, it just sticks out as something they could have worked on further. The one feature you missed on the bike, I can't, at the first blush, I don't think I'm missing anything critical on the motorcycle.
Adjustable windscreen.
Again, I didn't need to adjust it for my height. So
I'm just trying to think of all the things. Luggage.
Yeah, if KTM had
luggage.
considered how to mount luggage to the back of this motorcycle a little bit more and left things for you that were logically already there instead of having to buy a rack, etc. later, maybe that would have solidified its purpose as a long distance travel bike better. Extrographer has asked, Expulse, 2 years, 26,000 kilometers, mostly tour, 20% off-road. Planning to upgrade my vehicle because I think I have learned what I needed to from the old vehicle. And if I buy whatever next, 5 years I want to keep it. I might outgrow this vehicle in the middle, but I'm willing to upgrade for a more capable vehicle. Wanted to know the electronics that come with the S, do they make sense and do they work or not? Yes, they do and they make sense. Price is not a concern. I just want to know if the things this motorcycle has works or not. And the KTM bankruptcy thing. Okay, let me answer the bankruptcy thing at the end of this video before we sign out. But fundamentally, all the electronics work. I think what you're thinking is the right thing. This should be the motorcycle for you. I would, if you're doing a lot of touring, some off-road, don't settle for the X. I think you're in the right zone for the S. Krishna K77, export model has suspension travel of 230 along with a taller seat height. That's the R. Do you think we are missing out? No, I think KTM is doing the right thing here by giving you 3 options instead of 2 globally. Those guys get the off-road heavy and the unelectronic cheap version. We get the affordable one. We get the India specific reasonable seat height with reasonable capability one. And if you're in the right mood for it, then the all singing, all dancing travel off-roader. I think the fact that we will eventually have 3 options and they'll have 2, I think we're doing fine. And yes, I think this S model will outsell the R in India. So I'm no two ways about it. RPKG, nag free is the bike. Should you opt for it right away, wait for things to iron out? I'm not expecting too many issues with this bike because the basic core mechanicals are the same as the Duke 390, which has been on the market for a year, so we know what the issues are. If this is still worrying you, We are in March as we're recording this. Wait till April, May, and then buy one. I don't think this requires a 6-month wait. There's not much on this bike that has to happen and settle in. Harsha, curious if the improved off-road credentials take a toll on its road touring ability. Not really. This is a travel motorcycle fundamentally with off-road ability improved to where it should have been in the first place. It's not something magical that KTM has done. The result can feel magical.
You have to think about it this way. They took what was a street bike first and modified it to be an adventure, whereas this has been thought grounds up first to be an adventure bike, and this is the calmer, more multi-purpose version of it. So its off-road ability will be strong while being great on-road as well.
Yeah, and I'm to saying KTM is not even willing to classify this motorcycle as a dual sport as it is. It is still a road bike with a lot of off-road ability now. So since you're saying 90% touring on the road, does it make better sense than 390X? We'll talk about the 390X when we'll explore this idea further, but I will say this. When I started to think about touring in India, I only had the Duke and I did what I could with it, right? But every time I encountered a bad road, I would suffer and get to the other side a little bit. This bike, and why I like bikes like this is they're fine on tarmac, but when the tarmac ends, they're not immediately out of sorts. You can just carry on and plug away at it, feeling like I'm not suffering, the bike's not struggling, you're still having a good time. That's why, to me, long travel suspension like this on a travel motorcycle makes a lot of sense. Radical buzz, weight distribution of the bike, it's actually a very, very neutral motorcycle. It doesn't feel top heavy, it doesn't feel bottom heavy, it doesn't feel front or back heavy. It's just very, very natural feeling. So I have not actually sat thinking about, oh, I have a 12-inch wheel when I was going up the ghat. What happened? Why are you giggling? 5'7", use a 411 with luggage and all. It can be.
One sec, you're done with that one. You know what your description was like? Oh, it's a Honda.
Yeah. I'm 5'7", use a Himalayan 411 with luggage and all, sometimes a bit cumbersome and top heavy. Felt the same with the 450. Does the bike improve on this? Is it easy to maneuver like the NX? Look, the NX has a twin cylinder engine at the bottom, so it anyway has more weight. So when you add weight to the top, it is going to not feel so awkward. Single cylinders, they will react more to luggage. It's also a function of where you place this luggage. To me, heaviest luggage needs to go around the engine. That means the tank bag is where I would put my heaviest stuff. If you have bags that sling down on the sides of the tank, that's also a great place to put heavy stuff. That's right next to the center of gravity. The Adventure has crash bars already built in. Hang stuff off those crash bars. Great place to put heavy things. The bike will react less. But if you have a top box and then you decide to load up the top box, all motorcycles will react badly to it.
Saddlebags.
So low being on the crash bar or saddlebags, great idea. Tank bag, when I pack, all my tools, etc., the heaviest thing, they always go into the tank bag, not because of access, because that's the place to put the heaviest things, right? And tail bag, better than tail rack, because it's closer to the center of gravity again, and you can cinch it down, so it's as low as possible while sitting on the seat. Saddlebags are ideal. On this motorcycle, since there is no upswept exhaust, you just put a stay and you should be able to get a very nice set of saddlebags going. So, will this be a good candidate for your single bike garage? Yes, Livingston, I think it will be. KTMs are made for mechanics by mechanics. Will this ADV help me become an auto enthusiast? I think you're on MotorInc Circles already, so I think you're already halfway there at least. Satish the Gunner, can this be a one bike garage? Yes. Frequent gear shifts like the previous generational community. Okay, it doesn't need frequent gear shifts, but it helps the motorcycle if you do, because it feels better for it. If you remember, the Duke 390 likes for you to be in the right gear at the right time. So does this bike, but it doesn't mandate that you must do it. I hope that's clear. If not, just leave me a comment. Wow. Tractability on lower RPMs, I would not say it's outrageously good, but it is good enough.
Does it still do that shuddering?
No. It's smooth enough. It works itself out. And what I didn't mention to you, it has crawl mode, which means when the revs start to fall, let's say you're climbing off-road and it's beginning to stall, it comes and supports the revs a little bit and stops it from stalling, which also works in traffic.
Okay.
So Suzuki used to have a very similar system. This is not similar to the TVS system. It's a lot more similar to the Suzuki system, which was designed for new riders. Where the idea being that if you're unsure of what you're doing, the revs will just stay up and not let you stall. It's literally a function like that. It's built into this motorcycle. A lot of people who tried it on road and off road said, seems to work. Is the X variant still the bargain it was? I haven't tested it yet. We are working on it, and that will be another episode. Prima facie, yes. If they release the SMCR, would it be a good road bike potential replacement to the Duke? Could be, but the Duke now has a 15-liter tank. The SMC will have a 9-liter tank, so it's a use case situation. If you never want to leave the city with an SMC, a 9-liter tank, slightly inconvenient, but you can manage it. If you want to tour a 9-liter tank on a 398cc engine, you're going to get fried a little bit.
And SMCs as in the supermoto as an idea is hugely appealing, but remember it has all the drawbacks of an adventure as well. So like the seat height is going to be high. It will be high. So it is
860.
Yeah, there you go. 860 mm, and you will have the tall suspension. Yes, it will be sportier than this, but it is all the things that make it a kind of a niche that appeals to a certain kind of rider.
Adventure Deb. I own a 2023 390 Adventure spoked wheel version. Should I consider switching? I know upgrading would mean a bigger capacity motorcycle, but my big bike aspirations are a street naked or sports. I really like my adventure motorcycles to be mid capacity, lightweight, reliable, and cheap to maintain. Thanks. He's bought a motorcycle about a year and a half ago. Should you be spending money right now? No, I don't think so. Though this motorcycle is definitely better than what you're riding right now, but should you be spending money on another motorcycle this soon, having acquired a motorcycle, and lose all that money in the process?
It doesn't sound like you are upset with your motorcycle. So
Correct.
for the reason for you to upgrade just because a newer version has come isn't reason enough.
You're
The
right.
day you feel like, yeah, this motorcycle is now getting in my way of what I want to do, then you should consider.
And the ADV segment will fill out. It's a very popular segment globally, and we can see the first signs of things coming. You've just bought one, effectively. So stick with your bike, do what you can. I think by the time you come to the point where you're exhausted by your 390 spoke wheel properly, there'll be a lot more options than these bikes on the market too.
And I think currently resales for your bike will be particularly low. So it would make sense to not sell now. Use it, make the most of it, and then think about it later.
I am Sandy asks, how is the off-roading capability comparing it with the KLX230 Kawasaki and the Himalayan 450? Is it worth spending extra from SW to X? We'll talk about in the next episode. Bankruptcy will come to last. KLX230 is meant to be a light-duty, beginner-friendly 230cc off-roader. To me, the Enduro R could rival that better. Is the 230 good at the price Kawasaki is launched it at? Honestly, I don't think so. Because it's a very narrow focus motorcycle for a lot of money. It's not designed to do many more things. So a KLR 230, which is like the KLR 650 scaled down to this engine, I think would have been more versatile than this. So I'm not super kicked about the KLX 230, although I'm sure it's a decent off-roader. The Himalayan is going to feel a lot heavier than the KTM, but the Himalayan will also feel a lot more plush than the KTM. So you'll have a sense of what's happening down there, but you'll be more isolated from it, whereas the KTM will give you more feedback. One of these two will give you more confidence than the other, and that's the part that you have to figure out what you prefer. A lot of riders prefer the harshness of the feedback, and then they want the suspension to tune out the harsh part and keep the feedback. And some people will say, I'm new to this, I'd rather not know so much and let the bike do a little bit of the heavy lifting, in which case the Himalayan might feel better. So we have a few questions about the bankruptcy thing. So here's what we know. KTM owes absolutely tons of money. And they came to the point where they realized if they continue to run the business like this, they would run out of money and have to shut the business, which is why they declared insolvency, which means they were in a situation where the business was at risk. At this point, government steps in and tries to help you restore the business. The government's intent here is to try and keep the employment, etc., and the economy of that place, which all industries have a big impact on, running. As we record this, the plan for restructuring that KTM has submitted to the government has been approved. What that means is it could have shut yesterday, but it has not. That is the other way to do it, where the government says, no, this restructuring plan does not work. Bring in people, split up this company, sell off the assets and recover what you can. Now, the plan is KTM will write off 70% of their expenses, which means what money they owe to the suppliers and all of that kind of thing. If they were owed $1, they're going to have to settle for 30 cents. Somebody did the mathematics on this. Was it Ryan F9? I'm not sure. Who said if they had done the other way, where they said, no, this restructuring plan is bullshit and let's shut this company down, they would have only got 15 cents or 10 cents or something like that. So 30 cents is not bad. KTM is trying to sweeten the pot, and I'm saying trying, please pay attention, because they've said, instead of paying this 30% over 2 years, which is what is legally normally done, they will try and pay this off on a much more accelerated schedule. As I understand it, they need about 550 million euros to be able to settle this debt. This is one side of it. How will they settle this debt is unclear. Obviously, KTM is working on it. Otherwise, this restructuring plan would not have been approved. Details are not available yet, as far as I know. Bajaj, who already have a near majority stake, but not a majority stake, and it's a complicated structure now. It used to be much simpler. Bajaj owns part of this, and they own part of that, and that owns.
It's a pyramid of companies with one at the top, which owns another one. Then another one owns this collaboration and stuff like that. So it's complicated.
Yeah. So all of the KTM companies as a group, that company that owns them, Bajaj has 49.9% stake. Bajaj has committed to a 150 million euro payout to KTM, out of which 50 is going now, and that will help them restart production by March, which is one of the first milestones of this restructuring program. That's 2. 3, Stefan Pierer is out, and they have a new CEO whose name, when I read, I'm sorry to do this, I am really apologize, but I immediately burst out laughing.
Okay.
Because his name is Gottfried Neumeister. KTM Gottfried, now they have a Neumeister. It just makes sense. But I don't know his record. I don't know good, bad or ugly, but he's the man in charge of putting this thing back together again. I understand MV Agusta has been returned back to the family that it was purchased from. Husqvarna and Gas continue to be part of the KTM family. MotoGP will go on for this year because I think the judge said ready to race the slogan hai. I mean, how can you stop them from racing? फिर तो brand values ही change हो जाएंगे. So this is the path. Now we will see over the next 6 to 9 months how KTM comes back onto its feet. Bajaj will have a role. CF Moto, who is the other partner from China, they will have a role to play in this. But this is all we know. Now, if this concerns you, don't buy the bike. These bikes are made by Bajaj. And in theory, if KTM were to disappear, there is no reason why Bajaj wouldn't be able to continue to make these motorcycles because that's how bankruptcy works. But if this concerns you, don't buy the bike. Simplest answer ever. Last time we said for the Duke, hey, look, brand new engine. If you're concerned about it, wait 6 months to a year and see what happens and then buy the bike. What's the rush? We're saying the same thing here from the other side. And don't think mechanically there's anything new on the bike. No reason to stop. But if the bankruptcy thing is a concern for you, that's not an issue.
I mean, these are the kind of things we see constantly. And like there are brands, big brands in India, like we talk about Renault and Citroen, where they're making great products, but people have this question mark about the brand. And if that's a big enough concern, stay away. It's as simple as that. The products are good.
Yeah. The car you buy and the motorcycle you acquire should give you joy in your life and not bring worries home. And I'm not even going into whether the worries are justified or not important. If this is the kind of thing that worries you, just don't do that thing. It's fine. There are other options that you can explore. And there are other ways that you can do the same thing. Simple.
Yeah. So quite simply, we were talking about this earlier, and I think the way Shumi put it to me was quite good because he said the way it works right now in the insolvency court is it's accepted the proposal from KTM and all the progress is marked out, right? What they have to achieve, for which they're getting money, for which they will have to table in reports of what their status is. And that plan stretches for about 2 years, right? There are markers in between, like March, like Shumi mentioned, there's another one later this year. So clearly they've got a plan for this time frame. So at least in that sense, for a 2-year window, you see that they've got a game plan of how to try and get out of this.
This has become a tremendously long episode. So we still have to talk about how this motorcycle actually does off-road. But I think we're in a good place in the sense that in the next episode, I'm not sure if it will be sequentially the next episode, not probably will be, when we discuss the 390X, which has the 19-inch wheels, similar suspension travel, more road bias setup. We'll also talk about the off-road ability of the S as a direct contrast to the two, because I think it'll help you decide between the two bikes a lot more directly. So we're not discussing off-road any further. So we've covered what this motorcycle is, all of that context setting is done. We've discussed the family, we've discussed the platform, we've discussed on-road manners, touring ability and answered a bunch of questions. Thank you so much. If there's anything that we still haven't covered on these specific aspects, please do leave us a comment. We prefer you do it on the app because it's easier for us to track, but wherever is fine. In the next episode, we are specifically talking about off-road ability of the S and what the X is like as a difference in feeling, behavior, capability and price. If there are questions relevant to that, please leave us a comment. Again, any way you like. We'll do a similar questions from the circle segment there, and there we'll take the focus to the X as a primary and the off-road ability of the S as a secondary.
Done.
Right?
Yeah. I think this is the new record for sure.
Yeah.
So what else do you want to talk about now?
Nothing. Now, next excitement for us will be the 210 test bike. So 210, Scram 440, Classic 650, we are waiting for. And for testing, I'd want the simple one, the updated River Indy, the Adventure 390X is on its way here as we are recording this. So that motorcycle, more testing on the S has still to happen. View balance stories against the Himalayan have to happen. And that's the story I'm excited about, because everybody's going to take a side on that story, which always makes things interesting. And I don't think that there is one side that wins.
Let's find out.
Let's find out.
Cool. So, if you still have any questions remaining, do hit us up in Circles. And if you've already asked us questions on Circles, we hope we've answered those questions. If you have any questions about the Adventure X, about its off-roadability, do let us know, and we'll be discussing that in one of the upcoming episodes. Thank you so much for watching.